Hi, my name is Josh Fulton. The topic for this mini lecture is going to be the American Protective League. So let's get into this. The American Protective League was founded in early 1917 and is relevant for the purposes of discussing the First World War and for American history through about 1919-ish, late 1918, 1919. So the concept of the organization gets going just a little bit before the United States enters the First World War. So in the time period of the First World War, so the 19 teens, so specifically 1914 through to 1918, there are concerns in the United States by some in the country over forms of what they perceive as what they're calling labor radicalism. Now, a lot of this was connected to certain specific labor organizations, in particular, labor unions like the Industrial Workers of the World. Now, the manner in which, of course, those who were defining the IWW as radical, some of us today might not have as many issues with that. The idea of organizing workers regardless of race, right, this kind of thing. But there was a perception of the IWW as being profoundly radical and thus inherently a threat to American identity, and particularly perceived as a threat to certain industries, in the U.S. So there's this perceived threat. Now, there's also, of course, forms of rising political radicalism at the time. There had been the growth of anarchism in the late 19th century, early 20th century. 1917, of course, is also going to be the year the Russian Revolution occurs, so there's some concerns over political radicalism. And so what you ended up with in the case of the American Protective League was this idea of a group of individuals, we might call them sort of corporate sort of individuals connected to industry, corporate leaders, who perceive themselves as a sort of a class opposed to this form of labor organizing, and who perceive labor communities as potential threats against American identity. And so in 1917, the Justice Department and the criminal justice apparatus in the country is somewhat limited in terms of its operational capabilities. You have a precursor to the FBI that is referred to as the Bureau of Investigation. And what the American Protective League does as a quasi-public, quasi-private organization is kind of offer a way to be able to increase the capacity or capabilities of what maybe criminal justice institutions would be able to do in 1917. Now, when they're formed, the credentialing process for making individuals into agents of the APL is a different process than what someone might go through in order to become, say, an FBI agent today, or to become a part of a criminal justice organization today, where there would be an expectation of degrees and study and appropriate training and this kind of thing. Whereas here it was kind of a version of, do you oppose labor? Do you have a car? Are you, sort of on this side, sort of politically? Do you view certain things politically, and do you have maybe the financial capability and time to be able to commit to this? And if you did, it would be possible for you potentially to become a member of the American Protective League. And now this is again going to be largely men. This is going to be largely white individuals. And this APL is an organization that by the time you get to kind of the high point of the war, they're going to claim that they've got nearly 250,000 people that are going to be a part of this. So this is going to start in Chicago. It's going to be existing nationwide. It's going to be centered around industrial areas and other parts of the country. And what's going to happen is the APL is going to kind of link itself to the home front wartime agencies and institutions, and kind of offer itself as an ability to increase the efforts of what those institutions are going to be doing. And so they're going to assist in kind of some of the wartime checks and processes that are going to go on. For example, in Illinois, the American Protective League is going to have offices in the building and space where the wartime government for the state of Illinois is going to have its offices in Chicago. In the summer of 1918, they're going to have what are called slacker raids, both in Chicago and nationwide. The idea was to check and see whether or not young men had their draft cards, if they were registered for the draft, if they were engaged in wartime effort. The American Protective League is going to provide agents who are going to provide assistance to the criminal justice officials that are going to be conducting most of those raids. So they're going to be kind of put out there as additional individuals. Now, the APL is, supposedly an auxiliary of the Justice Department. It can be kind of tricky, the idea of what's in a name with that. They're not necessarily, going to be, what we might view as sort of complete, what we might view as federal agents today, but they're going to kind of see themselves as that. And even though they're not really allowed to necessarily detain individuals or to be armed, like that kind of thing, they're very much going to do that. And they're very much going to be fairly active in enforcing concepts of loyalty in wartime America. So particularly if you lived in a major city, which had a fairly heavy industrial base, so a place like Chicago is going to be very big for this, you're going to have that city kind of organized into a series of smaller groups of which the APL is going to provide agents and oversee those areas. And they're going to have a role to play with that. Now, in as much as they are increasing sort of the capabilities of what a state is going to be able to do during wartime, it brings up a lot of questions. So certainly questions about speech, certainly questions about criminal justice, certainly questions about loyalty, questions about the right of these individuals to engage in this kind of activity. So, by the time you get to the end of the war, this is going to wind down eventually, but it's a real interesting organization for understanding how the U.S. adapted and how the U.S. sought to be able to define itself and construct itself in the middle of war. Thank you very much.